All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment. And we have a number of panelists who are with us tonight. Some will be joining in, but let me just take a few minutes to thank those folks who are on the call already or who may be joining us throughout the evening. Invited this evening, and many of them are with us, are members of our Board of Education, Board President Jeff Maslin, Vice President Bill Nevins, Board members Jennifer Wilson, Courtney Jaskula, and John Diefender. We also have our school principal, Jennifer Canavo, our coordinator of Pupil Personnel Services, Megan Amatrano. Joining us representing our teacher subgroup is Sherry Vandenberg. Our BOCES Health and Safety Specialist, Jamie Bonino. Two parent members with us tonight, Christy Johnston and Vanessa Mercado. Thank you, ladies, for being here. From Durham Transportation Services, I have Stacy Christian. The YMCA does not appear to be on yet, but joining us may be Alicia Salamone Powers and Lynn Siebert. And I'm also anticipating Erin Cagwin, our communications specialist. And from CS Arch, we have Mike Schwartz. Thank you all for being here tonight. And let me try sharing my screen again. And just so our panelists know, we have about 19 parent members joining us this evening as well. Okay. So hopefully my screen sharing has started. Our agenda for this evening, we already did the introduction of the panelists. We're going to talk a little bit about our planning process to date and an overview of our plan, further detail and considerations that are underway or that will be forthcoming. We'll talk about screening potential cases and testing. And throughout the evening, if you have questions, you are able to submit them at forumcomments@menands.org. We will address as many of those questions as we can tonight. Following the last presentation, which was a week ago, we did develop an FAQ, or a frequently asked questions. That is posted on our webpage. If for some reason we cannot get to all of the questions tonight, they will be addressed in that FAQ following tonight's meeting. And then we have an additional meeting scheduled for Thursday of this week. For those that may be participating who participated last Monday, the presentation will be very much the same with just a few minor adjustments. And then there were some pretty specific questions that came out of the first forum relative to special education services, academic intervention services, and English as a new language services. So we have added a little bit more detail in the presentation that you will see this evening if you were with us last week. So let me talk a little bit about our planning process. Oh, I apologize for that. So really this process started before we even found ourselves having to close back in March. Myself, along with our former principal and now our current principal, have been meeting regularly with the regional superintendents, assistant superintendents, and other specialized BOCES staff members, some of whom are on the call with us tonight. And beginning the first week of July, we began engaging in weekly meetings with stakeholders. That was a faculty group, staff and parents, as well as our transportation providers. And then ongoing review was conducted of the requirements and recommendations from a number of agencies, including the state and county health departments, and New York State Education Department, and the governor's office. Again, alluded to experts who were consulted throughout the process on particular requirements of the plan. And again, some of those are with us this evening, particularly as they relate to health and safety. And throughout our planning, the health and safety of our students, our staff, and their families have remained our top priority. Throughout that process, we began to identify required materials and supplies that we would need, both from a health and safety perspective and an instructional perspective, and we began to order those right away, knowing that supply would ultimately be an issue. So our plan in its entirety can be found on our webpage. On July 13th, the governor made his initial statement about the plans. And then on August 7th, he made the announcement that public schools were scheduled to reopen for the fall. And per his directive, we have prioritized the efforts to return all students to in-person instruction. We are in a unique circumstance being a K-8 district and having just completed a pretty extensive building project that has added significant amount of space to the building, that we are able to physically bring students in adherence to all of the guidelines and recommendations set forth from both NICED and CDC. And not only the requirements, but those heightened recommendations as well. That said, we will be offering a remote model of instruction as well. So there are many components to the plan. I've listed those here for you. And again, the entire plan can be located on the webpage and reviewed. What I've really focused on in this presentation are those key components and those questions that are continuing to come up from parents and families. And those include health and safety, instruction, and child nutrition. The key components of the health and safety is we are adhering with social distancing recommendations. Again, not just requirements, but the heightened recommendations from all agencies who are providing some guidance and direction. Also, along with what is being recommended, we would be minimizing interactions among students and staff, avoiding large group gatherings, and allowing for proper cleaning and sanitation throughout the day and after the close of each school day. From an instructional perspective, we are looking at high quality instruction regardless of the format, be that in person or remote, with a key focus throughout our planning on social emotional well-being of students, technology and connectivity, and again, as I mentioned, at the onset, special education and English as a new language needs. We have a few slides on that. And again, regardless of the method in which children will attend school, be it in person or remote, being sure that they are provided meals daily. So because we are able to bring all students in person, I want to share with you the schedules that we have devised to do that. Now, keep in mind, this is a fluid plan. We are going to continue to get recommendations and guidance, but this is what we have in place at this point in time. So if we look at the K-5 schedule and the 6-8 schedule, and you'll see the 6-8 schedule in just a few minutes, they will look different. K-5 students, we often have families who rely on older siblings to get students on and off the bus. So we wanted to allow for this in our scheduling. So our K-5 student in-person schedule, buses would arrive at approximately 8:30. Parent drop-off, you note, is a little bit later. The staggered arrival times for buses and parents is to accommodate the social distancing during entry and exit into the building. And at the other end of the day, parent pickup would be at 2 and bus pickup would be at 2:15. You will note that regardless of the grade levels, every student has a homeroom period, a morning meeting. That morning meeting, by the way, is to really focus on that social emotional well-being that we discussed. And there are instructional blocks across the day, lunch is provided, and in addition, we are able to, with this schedule, maintain all special area classes. And that includes art, music, gym, PE, library, and at many grade levels, Spanish. So our in-person middle school schedule, as I said, we wanted to allow for the older students to be at home to assist with younger siblings as needed, both before and after. So they come in a little bit later and leave a little bit earlier. You will also notice that they have 4 periods a day, as opposed to a typical 8-day schedule, but those are for a longer period of time than they would typically have. And so they would get their full schedule over the course of 2 days. Important to point out, though it will come up later as you take a look at this, This middle school schedule also transfers pretty nicely to a remote schedule in the event we find ourselves needing to close again because of a spike in cases and or as directed. We would be able to move pretty easily to what's referred to as a synchronous schedule with live instruction for those students while they are at home. Talk a little bit about relevant transportation information, and I've talked to this a little bit already. The staggered arrival and dismissal times allow for students to be assigned seating on the bus while maintaining social distancing and to allow for cleaning of high-touch surfaces between runs. Talked about the variation in the parent and arrival and dismissal times, and the buses would be disinfected twice daily in between the elementary run and the secondary run. Students will be expected to wear masks on the bus. Other additional information, with very few exceptions, students will have limited movement throughout the day and will remain in what is referred to in pods in a lot of the conversations, and that is to minimize exposure. K-5 students will remain in homerooms and special area teachers will move to them. Again, there's a few exceptions and we'll talk about those. And 6-8 students will also remain in homerooms and the content and special area teachers will move to them. So here's where we talk about some of those exceptions. We have students requiring certain related services. That includes special education, ENL, and AIS is not listed on here, but will be touched upon later. Those students may move to small group instruction areas under the guidance and direct supervision of staff with cleaning protocols in place, and we'll go into that in more detail in a little bit. Again, special area classes have all been maintained. Lunches will be delivered and eaten in homerooms. Elementary special areas typically provided over the course of the year. Under this delivery model will be delivered in trimesters, and the students will receive individual materials that will be kind of their own personal kits because we don't want students sharing materials and exposure in that way. PE will utilize outdoor spaces as much as possible, weather permitting, and masks will be required during the instructional day with developmental and age-appropriate breaks provided as needed. Continue on, cleaning of high-touch surfaces will be conducted throughout the day, including bathrooms. Many classrooms already have self-contained bathrooms and or sinks. For those that do not, bathrooms will be designated to certain classes or groups. Hand sanitizer is available in all instructional spaces and at all entryways, as well as various other locations throughout the building. And disinfecting of the entire building will be conducted daily after students are dismissed. As far as screening potential cases and testing, we will require daily temperature attestations and screenings prior to students' arrival at school in alignment with the CDC recommendation, and the resulting reports will be monitored by school and staff. That same application will be utilized for staff, contractors, and any vendors who would enter the building. In the event of a positive case, the district will notify the state and local health departments immediately upon being informed, and any positive COVID-19 diagnostic test results by an individual within school facilities or on school grounds, and that includes students, faculty, staff, or visitors. In the event that testing would need to be conducted, the district will work with the local department to support implementation and will partner with them for contact tracing protocols. And I have an update on that just as of about 4:30 this evening. I am pleased that myself, along with all of the other Albany County superintendents, have a meeting on Friday with Dr. Elizabeth Whalen, who is the commissioner of the Albany County Health Department. And I anticipate following that meeting, we will have far more detail to add to our plan and to be able to provide. Among the questions that has come up from parents is, what does 6-foot social distancing look like? So these are actual pictures from some of our classrooms at this point in time as we are preparing for the start of the school year. The bottom or the left-hand picture you're looking at right now is a current second grade classroom. The classroom on your right is a current 5th grade classroom. I'm sorry, that's a 3rd grade. So on the left is 2nd grade, on the right is 3rd grade. And if we move to the next slide, the classroom on the left is a current 5th grade classroom, and the classroom on the right is one of our current middle school classrooms. Many of you likely know that the middle school wing is a new addition as of this year, and the classrooms in that middle school wing are much larger than several of our existing classrooms. Shift a little bit to talk about remote instruction, which at this point in time is still a little bit challenging to fully describe to those of you participating tonight, because what exactly that looks like will be highly contingent upon the choice that parents make, whether to send students or not, and how many students we actually have here on campus, and how many will be participating remotely. Certainly it will look different than in-person instruction. And I'll go back, and I pointed it out when we were looking at the middle school schedule. The middle school schedule as it exists will transfer better to a remote model, or more easily to a remote model, because it is already a truncated day, and will allow for synchronous or live in-person instruction. Elementary schedules would certainly need to be modified. It could not be the expectation, nor should it be, that students are sitting in front of a screen from 8 to 2. So the focus at the elementary level would be on high priority standards, and in particular, math and ELA. And we'll see some samples in a few minutes of what that might look like. Students, again, will continue to receive any special education, ENL, or other related services if the choice was to participate remotely. So we did experience a period of remote learning from March through the end of the school year. And we certainly recognize that there were things that we could have done better. We have heard a lot from parents and feedback around what worked, what was problematic, what was challenging. We've had similar conversations with our faculty and staff. So to that end, resources are being developed to assist both students and families with accessing and utilizing online platforms. And also the district is working to align the platforms across grade levels and classrooms to the extent possible. We know we had some cases last year where you may have had students in different grades using different platforms and different sign-on protocols, and we're trying to make that as standard as we can across the grade levels. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we identified needs and we made purchases early. We have secured access to additional Chromebooks, as well as hotspots for those families who may have difficulty accessing the internet, as well as technology that is going to assist us in that synchronous or live learning in a remote model. So if we take a look at sample remote schedules for K-5, and you will note at this point that there are not times associated with this. Again, that is going to be contingent on numbers and how we have to deploy staffing, but also the attention is being given that it cannot, nor should it be an expectation that students sit all day in front of a screen. So you see a period of time for the first 4 days of the week, Monday through Thursday, dedicated to ELA. And if it gives you a better sense, the larger the block, the more time would be spent on that. ELA encompasses reading and writing, where we want to put the priority of our instruction. Math also has a dedicated time, Monday through Thursday, as does a combination of science and social studies. And you notice across the 5 days, we will still give remote students access to special area content. Friday looks a little bit different. So we can utilize that time to really help to meet the individual needs of certain students, to bring the class together as a group in a class meeting, and also focus on the social emotional needs. The sample schedule from 6 to 8, you will note, does not look very different from the in-person schedule 6-8. What I would say is the instruction could look differently. So for instance, if your period 1 is math from 9:40 to 10:30, It may not be that full period live streamed. It may be a lesson, and after the lesson, then students would either work on their own in small groups or conjunction with the teacher, depending on the individual needs of the students and the group. These are the new slides I referenced earlier, speaking specifically to the support services for students. And what both Ms. Canavo and Ms. Amatrano have done for us is list those services and talk about how it would or would not look the same or different if we were in person or remote. So academic intervention services are typically provided to students who struggle in reading and math. If we are in an in-person model, support teachers would push into classes whenever possible. The use of pullout would be limited. As we said, we're trying to keep students in the same space as much as we are able to do. In the event that there were pullout services, cleaning protocols, mask wearing, and social distancing would be in place. In the event of remote instruction for a student receiving academic intervention services, they would have scheduled time with that service provider to receive that service. Similarly, English as a new language, students, if they are in person, will receive standalone and integrated services with the cleaning protocols, mask wearing, and social distancing in place. And in the event of remote instruction, they would have time designated with their ENL teacher. And just a point, this was something we had in place prior to the situation we're in now, but the district does have additional ENL support, which will be hired for has been hired for the upcoming school year. Special education services can be delivered in a variety of ways. It can be indirect consultant teacher, direct consultant teacher, or resource room services. Or the indirect consultant teacher doesn't change significantly if we are in person or remote. The classroom and general education teacher would meet to plan for instruction and modifications. As far as direct consultant teacher, if we are in an in-person model, the special education teacher will be in the classroom to support the students with IEPs. If it is remote, the service provider would meet with families and make adjustments based on what is in the best need for the student to meet his or her goals. And lastly, in resource room, the students would go to the resource room in an in-person environment, much like indirect consult and direct, with their service provider. Cleaning protocols, mask wearing, and social distancing would be in place. If in a remote setting, time would be scheduled with the resource room teacher to meet with the students via Google Meet. Some students receive self-contained reading or math. If that is in person, the students would go to the special educator's classroom with all those protocols in place. If it is a remote setting, again, that would be conducted via Google Meets. Related services, and that includes speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and counseling. Again, they would go to the service provider's room with all of those protocols and practices in place. And in a remote, it would be conducted via Google Meets. Additional adult support in an in-person instruction model, staff members will be in the classroom, just like they typically are, to support students' IEPs, needs, and accommodations. In remote instruction, since the student is at home, that service would not be applicable. So many families have, but families will need to select their option. I just want to check my numbers. As of when I signed on tonight, we had about responses from representing just less than half of our students. We are asking parents to make a decision by August 19th. The survey has been up. The link is on our webpage. It's gone out via a variety of vehicles. And because of the implications of students coming and going, we do have to set some benchmarks for when students can return to in-person instruction if they choose remote, because if we have more students coming back into the building, which our hope is that all of our students will participate in in-person learning, but we have to be planful for that from a social distancing and space perspective. So K-5 students who select remote can come back at the end of, can choose to return at the end of each trimester. That is every 10 weeks. And for our 6-8 students who select remote, we have currently put that benchmark at 20 weeks. We have done that because that aligns with some half-year courses. We have had some questions from parents around that, if we would consider doing that at the quarter instead of the semester. So we are looking closely at that and the implications of adjusting that based on some parent feedback. Our information is fluid and ongoing. Everything continues to be updated and is updated in real time via our webpage at www.menands.org, with reminders going out through our Facebook page as well, and now using Everbridge in addition to School Messenger. We've also equipped our webpage with G-Translate, so all of that information can be translated into a variety of languages. Again, Everbridge and School Messenger have been used. The FAQ was developed following last week's forum. It will be added to following this evening's forum and then again Thursday. And questions can continue to be submitted to forum comments at menands.org. And I think we've had a number come in tonight. And then we do have an additional forum scheduled for later this week, Thursday at 6 p.m. So let me stop sharing my screen. And then you will take a look at the questions that have come in tonight. I just want to see if Aaron is on the line tonight to help us facilitate those questions. And he does not appear to me. So Jeff, I'm going to start if you can monitor those as well.
Yep.
Just bear with me 1 second while I pull those up on a separate device. All right.
You see me looking away, it's me looking at a second screen to look at the questions.
Okay, so some of these questions came in prior to today, so I'm going to start with those. When will students know who their teachers will be? When will parents get a supply list, and will there be recess? So as far as student assignments, again, that is going to be contingent upon having a better handle on who will be in person and who will be remote and how we are going to assign those teachers. I used the example last week, for instance, if it's a second grade class and we have a split where half of the students are participating remote and half of the students are going to be in person, the likelihood is that we would assign those two teachers accordingly. But until we have those numbers, we can't say that for certain, though the survey is scheduled to close later this week, and then we will be reaching out to families who have not participated. So I would hope we have a better sense of that by the end of next week. I'll point out too, though it went out in a message already, just to reiterate, our start date has been pushed for students to September 14th to allow for additional planning time and preparation here at school and for our staff. So we have a little bit more time to make those decisions. Similarly with supply lists, and Ms. Cadavo may be able to speak to this a little bit more, we have asked our teachers to revise their supply lists a little bit compared to what they would typically ask for, knowing, first of all, the hardships that many families are facing right now, but also that we won't have the ability to share materials, but we also want to minimize what students need. Also, here on campus, going through all of the materials we have available to us, many of which have been donated over time by local agencies, to provide as much as we can for students. And again, I think we should have a better handle on what we have available and what will still be needed by the end of next week. In relative to recess, there will definitely be recess time. What exactly recess will look like and can look like in accordance with protocols remains to be finalized. We are actually, Mrs. Canavo and I are participating in a regional meeting on Wednesday where both recess and PE are going to be two of the main topics of conversation. So we hope to learn more from that. All right. There is a question regarding for students who are choosing to be learning remote. It's just lengthy, bear with me for a minute. But are participating in our advanced science course at the 8th grade level, where there is a lab component if we would consider allowing students to come in person for the lab, but continue to work remote. It's a good question. It's one we have to think a little bit more about and the logistics around that based on where it sits in the day, how we could accommodate transportation to address that, and also go back and look at that we're trying to limit exposure across and among students to the extent we can. So if we have students coming in for part of the day and leaving for part of the day, that's something we just have to give a little bit more thought to before we can finalize the decision, but we certainly appreciate the question and the request. So this question is from a parent who is challenged with our school schedule being changed and the challenges that creates for her at work and childcare. I don't believe the ladies are on the line tonight from the YMCA. However, we have met with them and they are on, they've been working closely with us and with other schools, and they've actually been running very successful camp programs this summer. Certainly we understand the hardship created by a truncated day for working parents. To that end, we will work with the Y Time to continue our aftercare program and also to consider a before care program for those families who may need it. It's just something we have not had the interest in before, but we are certainly open to doing. Also, as we developed our plan for reopening and the spaces that we would use for instructional and classroom spaces, we have left the cafeteria available and we have left gymnasium available, knowing that both of those spaces could and would be used by Y Time in the event of before and or aftercare. All right, the next question is, how many hours of online class will there be in a day for first grade students? How a teacher would handle an online and an in-person class simultaneously, and what kind of assessments will there be for online students? And for the first part about the amount of time in class, I'm going to turn that over to Ms. Canavo, who's been really spending a lot of time working on schedules and what they would look like, and then I can hop back in and address the other two.
When we look at first graders and the amount of time that they will spend, what I can say is that we are going to try to mirror what happens in the classroom, understanding that when our first grade students are in the classroom, they are not with the teacher the entire time. They often receive some sort of instruction and then they have a follow-up assignment or activity or something of that nature. And I would expect online you would experience something similar just in the home environment. You would have some sort of lesson that would be the length of that lesson would be very dependent on the topic. And then students would sign off and have some sort of follow-up independent activity that they would often have in the classroom. If it was a reading task, they may end and have reading questions or word work to complete on their own. So we will try to mirror that. However, it may not be identical, but I would also just ask parents to understand when your students are in front of us, they're not with the teacher the whole time either. They're usually cycling in, doing independent work and working in small groups.
Thanks, Jen. Part two of that question, I think I've addressed, but I'm going to ask it and re-answer it anyway. How a teacher would handle online and in-person classes simultaneously. They wouldn't necessarily. Again, that's going to be contingent on the breakdown of the numbers, particularly at K-5. At 6-8, that will look a little bit different because we can do synchronous or live instruction. And I talked earlier about some of the procurements we made of needed equipment and materials. And among those items are actually cameras that allow what the teacher is teaching in the physical classroom to be broadcast to those students at home. And the last question was relative to the assessments for online students. And I think Mrs. Canavo addressed it in her answer, that following the instruction, there would be a follow-up activity or item that would be used to assess the students' learning of what was taught in class. All right, the next series of questions, and there's several of them, are from a 4th grade parent. What are the virtual class timings? The answer to that is we don't quite know yet. And again, that's contingent upon numbers. It would not, however, be at 4th grade, much like 1st grade. We wouldn't expect a student would sit in front of a computer from 8 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. That's just not realistic. It's not best practice for screen time, and it's not age or developmentally appropriate. Are the classes going to be along with in-person classes? Yes and no, again, dependent on the numbers, and I hate to be so vague, but that's where we are at this point in time. Is the virtual class teacher the same as the in-person homeroom teacher? Again, that is dependent. We talked about assessments and assignments. I do want to say, though, one piece, particularly at the primary, if not the K-5 level, that we heard back from parents in the spring was the challenges with students submitting work and having to type it for our younger students. We recognize that, we identify that, and we've been working closely with our faculty and staff around other ways for students to be able to do actual physical writing and responses and then submit that written work. So that is certainly on our radar. And what are the grading parameters for virtual class students? I would say they would be aligned as much as possible to the typical classroom. Again, feedback we got from both parents and from our staff last year is evidence of learning that we used spring and not yet learned. There was a lot of room in between there, and we're working very hard to tighten that up. Okay, this question is about why we do not have a hybrid option. The reality is we do have a hybrid option. Our hybrid option, it includes kids being either here or at home. Many districts, if not all districts who are doing a hybrid model, the reason they are doing the hybrid model is because they cannot physically fit all of their students in their facilities at any one given time. We are able to do that, so we don't need to have some students here and some students not here. We are physically capable, in adherence to all of the guidelines, to have all students on site every day. All right. Without compromising the identity of any student, will parents be notified of how many students will not be wearing mask face coverings in school, more specifically in a student class and grade? And I would say that would only be limited to those students who have a medical inability to wear a mask, and that would be documented. We would certainly work with that parent and family. And then I think, yes, in fairness, we would have to let folks know if your child was in a classroom where somebody may not be wearing a mask. That said, there are options out there, and we actually have some samples on the way to protect students other than a face mask for those students who are unable to wear it. There is a little bit of challenge in that some of those options don't necessarily comply with fire safety standards that schools must abide by. So there are other alternative options there, but the easy answer to the question is yes, parents would be made aware. Can you clarify the mask policy again? I continue to hear verbally that students will be required to wear masks all day except for lunch and specific lunch breaks. However, the FAQ section states the following: students will be allowed to remove face coverings during meals, instruction, and for short breaks as they maintain appropriate social distance. I understand that to mean that the students will be allowed to remove masks during instruction. If it is one of those identified breaks, and again, we are looking for a little bit more clarification and hope to receive it at that meeting on Wednesday around PE. What we're hearing for PE is that if we are outside and if we can achieve 12 feet social distancing, we may not have to require students to wear masks, but we're still waiting to confirm that. And I hope to get more information on that on Wednesday. So during instruction, yes, students are expected to wear masks. However, we will work closely with our teachers to identify how to begin to understand and recognize when students are struggling, when they might need a break. And to that point, you may have one or two students in a classroom who have a sensitivity and require more frequent or more often breaks than other students. And we will work to identify and to address that. So primarily for instruction, masks, unless it's creating a barrier or a level of uncomfort. And just like any new skill that we ask students to do, it's going to take practice and it's going to take time to get used to. And I'll say tonight what I think I said last Monday night. We hope parents are working at home now with students to get them acclimated and used to that. I think it's fair to say that none of us likes to have a mask on all day long, and it's taken us a little bit of getting used to. If we have chosen remote learning, is there a set date yet to pick up Chromebooks and other materials? There is not yet. We actually had to secure several more Chromebooks, which we did. We have those on site. We are getting them up and running now. There's a process involved in doing that. And we also still, unfortunately, have about 17 Chromebooks remaining outstanding from the last school year. So we are still working to get those back. So I think that's another one of those things that later next week we should have a firmer handle on. And again, I'll point out that instruction is not scheduled to start for students now until September 14th. For younger students doing remote learning, will instruction be entirely online, or there will be some writing packet work, or will this be up to the individual teachers? I think I've addressed that a little bit already, but instruction will be kind of a, I don't want to use the word hybrid because that will confuse people, but there will be direct online instruction. There will be periods of time then that students have to complete tasks or assigned work. And we definitely are looking at ways other than digital input for students to be able to submit written work. Jen, would you add anything to that?
No, I think that works.
Will children from the same family be allowed to bus together regardless of K-5 or middle school? Arrive together? Can a student arrive early and go to their homeroom? Masks when, okay, let me answer that one first. So no, the transportation will be split by K-5 and 6-8. Part of what we're utilizing the time for while the middle school is not here is for the planning teacher, that the planning time that the teachers are entitled to prepare. So if we can't have them supervising students. Masks, when might a student not wear a mask? I think we've covered that, but while definitely talking about the options during physical education, potentially recess, and, you know, quite frankly, as much as possible, they should be wearing them. What is the sanitizing method used by the school? Will rooms be sprayed or wiped down? And that's actually a multi-step process. There is a solution that we use regularly throughout the day to do touch surfaces, door handles, bathrooms. Somebody on the call is not muted. They just might want to mute. And then we actually have a product and a device where once rooms are fully cleaned at the end of each day, they are sprayed with a sanitizing solution to fully sanitize each space. Is the 6-foot distance the radius of the desk? The middle school pictures did not appear. It was a 6-foot radius. Right now, all of the pictures you saw, there may have been one row in that middle school room that was not pushed up against the wall at this point in time because we're still needing to access the shelving in that room. But yes, they are 6 foot from seat to seat on either side, but also from front to back. And that also allows for a 6-foot distance from where the teacher would be stationed in the front of the classroom. How long will mask breaks be and how often during the day? And I think that really depends on the age and the needs of the students and the number of students who need them throughout the day. You know, I'm going to equate it, though I don't want to make light of the question. We have students, particularly at the younger grades, who have a challenge sitting in a seat all day long. And our teachers work very closely with them to provide them the appropriate breaks to stand up and to move. And the more we get to know our students and their needs, the better we are able to accommodate those particular needs and address their particular questions. So the answer is really it would be dependent. We want to maximize the time masks are on, but we certainly want to be understanding of students' individual needs. And I want to thank Ms. Wilson for that little bit of levity with the cat walking across the screen. Thank you, Jennifer. Jeff, I do not see any questions, any additional questions. I think I have hit, oh, I think I missed one. Hold on. I may have missed a couple here. Nope, those are from last week. Okay, sorry. I think I hit all the questions, but we will leave it open for a few more minutes. Again, it's forumcomments@menands.org. I don't know if any of the panelists have anything additional that they would choose to add this evening.
I would just say you hit all the questions. I checked the other BOE comments just in case something came on that. Nothing there. You have touched on every question.
Anything from any of our other panelists? And again, I want to thank those who are sitting on the panel. They have all contributed throughout the last couple of weeks and months in multiple conversations in various facets of reopening. So I thank them for their time and for their efforts. The survey is out there. All of the detailed information can be found on our webpage. That comment email address will remain open. We'll take those comments or questions that we received tonight. We will add them to the FAQ and update that by tomorrow afternoon. And as I've said before, if anybody has particular questions or concerns, or really just wants to talk, don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call me. I can be reached at 465-4561, extension 101, or via my email address, mlong@menands.org. And I would say the same is true for Ms. Canavo. Pick up the phone and call or send an email. We recognize this is challenging. It is new territory for all of us. I will say to you that throughout this process, the safety and well-being of our students and opening safely to provide them the instruction they need has been at the forefront. It is not a responsibility we take lightly. And again, recognize the difficulty as parents making the decision for the upcoming school year.
Dr. Long,
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
Q&A on the computer, 2 questions popped up. The first one was about providing worksheets for online students once a week.
All right. I think we could definitely put together some paper, how often and how quickly we could turn that around. I can't commit to at this point in time, but we can certainly take that into consideration.
And then Dr. Long, there was a second question about when will kindergarten screening take place?
And Ms. Canavo, I know you have been having some conversations with the kindergarten teachers and sending out some communications, so I'm going to let you take that one.
If we are able to, our plan is to have individual appointments with families and students towards the end of August, early September, so students and families have an opportunity to see the building. If they would like to do that virtually through Google Meets, we'll also offer that opportunity for them as well. The kindergarten teachers will be coming in this week to do a little bit more planning with me for that, but our hope is to provide some information, familiar faces, and get to know the kindergarten students a little bit better before that first week of school.
All right, and Jen, I think we have a few more questions coming on that Q&A. I see, let's see, kindergarten screening we did, worksheets we did, worksheets again, okay. Can we have hybrid method of instruction, specifically taking into consideration of lab work for grade 8 as September being the start of flu season also? And I addressed that earlier, but in case the person asking this question was not on the line, we're going to take a closer look at that. The facilitation of the in-person lab and where the lab sits in the middle of the school day and the transportation create some obstacles around doing that. Also have some hesitations because the idea is to minimize the number of interactions among groups of students. So bringing students in for a part or a portion of the day is not something that I am certain about yet, but we've heard the concern. We'll take a closer look at it and hopefully have some more information by the time we come back together later this week. And again, I think it will be a very similar conversation later this week, a similar presentation, but anybody who is on the line is certainly welcome to join us again.
Dr. Long, there's also a question about, should there be a survey submitted for each child?
Yes, and actually one other piece of clarifying information. If you would do a survey for each child, that would be great. We've had a couple come in with 2 names on it. That's fine. We will be able to go back and figure that out. When you are entering the grade of the child, please put the grade they are going into in the current year.
When's the survey due?
The survey will be open through the 19th. And I think it's set to expire at midnight on the 19th. And then, Jeff, there will be people who maybe were unable to access it or weren't quite ready to make their decision. Once we have all the results in, we'll be using our staff to reach out directly to those families who have not responded.
And then last but not least, Dr. Lone, can we include in the Q&A about immunizations for online and virtual learning?
Sure can. And to that note, I will say there have been some adjustments the state education department has made to certain requirements that we have to uphold. For instance, in a typical school year, we have to have 900 or 990 minutes, depending on the age of the child, of instruction. Been relaxed. One of the things that has not been relaxed is we still have to have 180 days of instruction. Another thing that has not been relaxed is the requirement around immunizations. So even if your child may be participating remotely, they still have to have the required immunizations to come to school. Some of those things may continue to change, and that really circles back to why our plan is posted on our webpage and is a fluid plan. As I mentioned, we're meeting with the county health director on Friday, myself and all of the Albany County superintendents, and I think we'll have far greater detail to provide around parts of our plan where it comes to testing and the other components around that. So continue to check that. I have been sending out pretty regularly a weekly update, hitting any of the key points, those things that have changed, and certainly I will continue to do so. But again, if you have questions or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out. All right, Jen, do you see any more on the Q&A? I don't see any more on the email.
No, there's nothing new in the Q&A.
All right, then I thank everybody for being here tonight. Thank our panelists especially, and we will be back here at 6 o'clock on Thursday night. Thank you, everybody.